Okay, so you want to own an estate. Picture it for a second. Iron gates swinging open onto a mile of private drive. A stone manor house at the end of it, 40 rooms, a walled garden, a lake, maybe a chapel on the grounds that is older than the country it sits in. Staff who know your name and your coffee order. That is the dream. That is what people picture when they think about owning a great estate. Here is what actually happens. Some estates run on a few $100,000 a year and quietly turn a profit. Some estates, ones worth $30 or $40 million, bleed millions every single year and nobody outside the family ever finds out. The same rolling lawns, the same portraits in the hallway, completely opposite financial outcomes. Today, we are going inside the real economics of owning one of the most romanticized and most misunderstood assets in the world. Before we talk about money, you need to understand what you are actually buying. Most people assume an estate is a big house. That is not how it works. An estate is a small, self-contained economy. It usually includes the main house, but also tenant cottages, barns, stables, woodland, farmland, sometimes a lake or a stretch of river with fishing rights attached. According to land agents who specialize in this market, a working estate in the United States or United Kingdom typically runs anywhere from 200 to 5,000 acres. And every one of those acres has its own maintenance obligation, its own tax treatment, its own legal history. You're not buying a house with a view. You're buying a small municipality that answers to nobody but you, and that comes with everything a municipality has to deal with: roads, drainage, boundary disputes, insurance, wages. Let's start with acquisition. A significant country estate in a desirable region of the United States, somewhere in the Hudson Valley, coastal Connecticut, or the Virginia Hunt Country, can run $8 to $30 million, depending on acreage and the condition of the house. In England, a listed manor house with a few hundred acres attached regularly clears 10 to 20 million pounds. But the purchase price is almost never the real number. Historic houses are frequently under a preservation designation, meaning any structural change requires approval from a heritage authority, and that approval process alone can add years and millions to a renovation. Roofs on buildings this size are measured in acres, not square feet, and a full roof replacement on a great house can run past $2 million on its own. Rewiring a 200-year-old house to modern code, replacing lead pipe, remediating asbestos. None of that shows up in the listing price, and all of it is mandatory before you can safely live there full time. Now, think about staffing, because this is where the fantasy and the spreadsheet diverge hardest. A functioning estate of any real size needs a house manager, a groundskeeper, or head gardener, often 2 or 3 gardeners depending on the size of the grounds, a gamekeeper if there is shooting or fishing on the property, stable staff if there are horses, a housekeeper, and seasonal labor for harvest if any of the land is farmed. Industry surveys of large private estates put annual staffing costs at anywhere from $400,000 to over $2 million a year before a single guest ever visits. And unlike a hotel, none of this scales down in a quiet month. The groundskeeper still has to mow 11 acres of lawn in August, whether the family is in residence or in the south of France. Then there is land maintenance itself, separate from staff wages. Fencing on an estate of any size is measured in miles, and post and rail fencing costs run $20 to $40 a linear foot installed. Drainage systems on old estates were built for 19th century rainfall patterns and fail constantly under modern storms. Woodland has to be actively managed, thinned, and replanted, or it becomes a liability, both financially and in terms of fire risk. Lakes and ponds need dredging every few decades, or they silt in and die. None of this is optional maintenance you can defer indefinitely. Deferred maintenance on an estate compounds like unpaid debt. A leaking roof left 3 years becomes a rotted roof structure left 3 years, and the bill does not double, it multiplies. Insurance and taxes are their own category of pain. Insuring a historic house with irreplaceable architectural details, original plasterwork, listed staircases requires specialist underwriters, and premiums on a major estate can run into 6 figures annually. Property taxes on estates with significant acreage are frequently the single largest line item after payroll, and many owners fight for decades to get agricultural or conservation classifications that reduce the assessed value. Because without those classifications, the tax bill alone can exceed what most families earn in a year. So how does anyone make this work? The same way luxury hotel owners do. They stop thinking of it as one asset and start running it as several businesses under one roof. Wedding and event rental on a great estate can bring in $50,000 to $200,000 for a single weekend. And because these are booked a year in advance on contract, the income is predictable in a way the rest of the estate is not. Working farmland is leased out or farmed directly. And in the United States and United Kingdom alike, conservation easements and agricultural subsidies can turn unproductive acreage into a modest but steady eye. Classification, come to $300,000. Total annual carrying cost before any income, roughly $3 million. Against that, event rentals bring in $400,000, farmland leases and conservation payments bring in $200,000, and occasional filming income brings in another $150,000. Total income, $750,000. The gap, over $2 million a year, comes directly out of the owner's pocket every single year, indefinitely. That gap is the real economics of owning an estate. It is not a return on investment. For almost every family that holds one, it is closer to a very expensive, very beautiful hobby that happens to appreciate in land value over decades. And that appreciation, along with the tax structuring around conservation and preservation, is usually the only thing that makes the arithmetic bearable at all. The families who keep an estate for 100 years are rarely the ones who love the house the most. They're the ones who treated it like the small, demanding business it actually is, staffed it correctly, diversified its income, and used every tax mechanism available, because behind every long gravel drive and every ivy-covered wall, that is the machine that is actually running. Classification, come to $300,000. Total annual carrying cost before any income, roughly $3 million. Against that, event rentals bring in $400,000, farmland leases and conservation payments bring in $200,000, and occasional filming income brings in another $150,000. Total income, $750,000. The gap, over $2 million a year, comes directly out of the owner's pocket every single year, indefinitely. That gap is the real economics of owning an estate. It is not a return on investment. For almost every family that holds one, it is closer to a very expensive, very beautiful hobby that happens to appreciate in land value over decades. And that appreciation, along with the tax structuring around conservation and preservation, is usually the only thing that makes the arithmetic bearable at all. The families who keep an estate for 100 years are rarely the ones who love the house the most. They're the ones who treated it like the small, demanding business it actually is, staffed it correctly, diversified its income, and used every tax mechanism available, because behind every long gravel drive and every ivy-covered wall, that is the machine that is actually running.